The long and short of it is government wants more cash off these companies than they want to pay. And the Supreme Court's just gone pay up. And now these companies are going, well, in case you hadn't noticed, we're pretty skint at the moment, thanks in no small part to the benign regulatory environment you created for Geo, which is now competing the hell out of us.
Yeah.
And we're losing subscribers and our margins down the toilet and all that sort of thing. So they've started sort of pleading for some degree of clemency. And then there's this trade body, I forget the acronym, which is probably just as well as I'd just mangle it anyway. But they apparently wrote a letter to the government going, look, can you throw our guys a bone? And seeing as you're in bailout mood, can you bail out Vodafone Idea and Bharti Airtel?
Yeah.
The problem is, all the operators are a member of this trade body, including Geo. And then Geo went public with a letter basically having a massive go at this industry body for sending this letter. Obviously, Geo doesn't want them bailed out. As far as Geo's concerned, Geo, even in its responding letter, even tried to make out that if they went out of business, competition would still be fine. Right. So basically, if there was a monopoly, a Geo monopoly, that would still be fine. It wouldn't be an issue, which I thought showed a fair bit of nerve on their part. Hello and welcome to another Telecoms.com podcast. We've got the core pod crew back together again with Jamie back in town and Ian from Light Reading. Hi guys.
Hello.
Just to remind you that if you're watching this on the site or on Facebook or on YouTube, you can listen to it on iTunes / Apple Podcasts / whatever they've rebranded it this week, and SoundCloud and other podcasting platforms. What else is... Oh, yeah, one last plug for our Telecoms.com live event, which is happening when you listen to it this Thursday, where it's going to be me and Jamie just kind of winging it, aren't we, Jamie? But we back ourselves to wing it, don't we? So if you want to watch us wing it, and with whatever degree of success we manage, then make sure you come along. And this week we are going to talk about... Okay, so this week it's been kind of quarterly seasons, but I don't think we're going to talk about an individual company's quarterlies. There have also been the numbers. I suppose we might mention Apple. Anyway, let's see. But there's been the smartphone shipment numbers, which I think are worth talking about because there have been some weird patterns within it that are worthy of discussion. And then I also want to talk about something I've been writing about a fair bit this week, which is the Indian... telecom scene, which is going a little bit crazy. As we know, it got sort of mucked about with a few years back, and that's all coming to a head. So that's interesting. We might talk about Google buying Fitbit, which has just been announced as we record this.
Oh, really?
I know, Pierre looks all...
Oh my God.
And then, if we got time, we might talk about UK 5G spectrum. And then one last thing before we crack on with it. We've actually got a sponsor because this podcast's so great. It was just a matter of time. And so I'm going to shut up now and let you listen to the sponsor message.
Mobile service providers will need a different approach to successfully roll out 5G new radio capabilities. Check out Amdocs Software automated and analytics-driven solutions at amdocs.com/5G-fast to learn more.
Right. Thank you, sponsor. Right. So smartphone numbers. So I'll head it off as I wrote about it. The market went back to growth. So it's been 2 years since the global smartphone market grew at all, which is fine. It kind of plateaued. There was massive growth from like when the first iPhone / Android phone came about. There's massive growth, and it reached, while not saturation of the sort of reasonable proportion of the population that you might imagine would own a smartphone. So then we're on this 2-year replacement cycle, which tends to lead to a sort of plateauing of sales. But it actually went back to growth. And basically the reason it went back to growth, more or less, is down to one company, and that's Huawei. And not just one company, but one company in one country, which is Huawei in China.
Even with the Android shenanigan?
Even with it, well, so
that's a recent thing, the Android shenanigans, isn't it? Yeah, that's not going to affect
in
them.
these shipment numbers.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Maybe it does and it doesn't. So that's why I wanted to flag it up, because I did a little bit of...
It's only for the devices that haven't been slated already. And any devices that have been sold over the up until this point have Google.
Yeah, no, I get that, but I also think it's possible that the channel and individual consumers would have already started to go off the idea in anticipation.
Yeah,
in anticipation of a lack of Android support in future. But it's not by no means, you're right, Jimmy, it's by no means guaranteed.
Also, just general negative press about Huawei. I mean, it's the sort of thing my dad goes, what's this weird Chinese company? Are you writing about them?
Yeah.
And he sort of might put someone like that off actually getting a Huawei handset.
Quite. I mean,
I mean, it sort of percolates through, doesn't it? He's like, Pierre and I listen to Joe Rogan a lot. Quite often Huawei comes up, and it's always interesting on a generalist podcast when they talk about something that you are relatively expert on. They kind of miss the point. They think it's about handsets, whereas it's actually predominantly about networks on the security side. But it's just interesting hearing them talk about it. You know?
Isn't any press good press on this?
Well, that's being put to the test, isn't it?
Yeah.
But so the interesting thing is the day before. So I tend to follow the numbers of my former employer, Strategy Analytics.
Well, they had an update, didn't they? Because I remember referring to that in a story I did on Apple.
Right.
That Strategy Analytics had same findings, I guess, as the other.
Yeah, exactly. So it's their numbers that I use as a basis for commenting on the whole.
And there's another
market.
one called Canalysis, is that right?
Canalis.
So
you're doing a very good job. You're a very good job of anticipating what I'm about to say.
Sorry. Yeah.
It's quite all right. It's like having Ray here. He does that. No, he doesn't. He tells me what to say because he's the boss. Anyway, yes, Canalis, the day before Strategy Analytics numbers came out, Canalis came out with numbers just specifically for China. And within China, Huawei's smartphone shipments had grown year on year by 66%, which is a ridiculous amount of growth. You know, they did put on an extra 15 million smartphone shipments year on year in China alone.
So what does that take them to?
It takes them to, I need to check numbers. They went from like 30 to 45 or something like that. It's,
right.
You know, in fact, something like that. So you got this 66% growth. And then everyone else went down. So, you know, China's incredibly competitive smartphone market because you've got these other domestic vendors like Oppo and Vivo and Xiaomi.
Yeah.
They all went down about 20%.
Right.
The overall Chinese market didn't grow that much. So it's suddenly, over the space of a year, skewed massively in favour of Huawei.
So it's basically Huawei growing its market share in China.
Massively.
That's what the results
hugely.
Yeah.
I mean, it grew its market share by about 15 percentage points, from about 25%. So like a year ago, Huawei was about 25, Oppo 22, Vivo 21, Xiaomi 20, something like that. There was that probably goes over 100, but anyway. But there was quite an even split among those four, and then suddenly it skewed massively in favour of Huawei.
And where do they get the numbers from? Because they don't have they.
Yeah.
Do they release the numbers, Huawei, or is this just analysts going and talking to people?
Huawei has released global numbers, and its quarterlies that I think we probably commented on this pod a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
It announced about 28% year-on-year global smartphone growth.
Right.
And Canalis, I can't make any comment on Canalis's methodology, but I know that nearly all analyst firms like them, like SA, like Ovum or IHS, I forget who's part of our gang these days.
Yeah.
There's a degree of educated guesswork. Okay, that doesn't mean that it's not quite accurate, but they don't know. There's not some newswire. There's not some feed.
Yeah.
The only analyst firm that can claim to have source information is GfK, because they use point of sale stuff. But even that, it's only a sample. It's like any survey. They've got point of sale in, let's say, 1 in 100 places. So, they'll derive data from that. But anyway, so, let's assume Canalis had an educated guess. But for them to guess that Huawei's gain has grown by 66%, they're not just going to completely pull that out of their arse. They will have done some on-the-ground research. So then the question is, how do you suddenly grow? Bear in mind, Huawei's always been strong in China. How do you suddenly grow 66% year on year?
Yeah.
And I just think that's a bit dodge. Now, I know from chatting beforehand that, Jamie, you're not so convinced that it's a little bit dodge. You think it's plausible that could just be on merit, on just out-competing?
Yeah, I mean, you haven't seen a massive Xiaomi launch recently. They launched their 5G phone at the beginning of the year. Oppo haven't had anything massive out recently.
Yeah.
And then,
I don't know what's been launched in China.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but if you look at the Huawei devices, they've had their sort of like their youth brands launched about 2 to 3 months ago.
Okay.
And then also they had their big flagship launch.
Yeah.
A month or so after that.
Is that Honor? Honor the youth?
Yeah, the Honor is the youth brand.
Yeah,
That's the one.
that's
yes,
like their semi-autonomous, direct-to-consumer brand.
So they've got. So I mean, and plus they're incredibly patriotic about Huawei, and I mean, you just look at and a lot of people, not Chinese people I've spoken to over here, and when I've been in China, they are incredibly passionate about Huawei as a business, not so much of ZTE or Xiaomi or Oppo. Or
Huawei has
like
a sort of unique standing.
I think,
in your
yeah.
experience.
I mean, from what I've seen and what I've spoken to people,
that's good.
It is the champion brand of China.
That's good to know. So there probably has been. I totally concede the viability of there being a fair bit of sympathetic purchasing and a fair bit of Huawei redoubling its efforts. Obviously, I just think if we'd had something, if we'd had half that growth, I would have found everything you just described and general business best practice and competing hard and launching at the right time plausible. So when you get up to this incredible spike, I just wonder, and I don't have any actual hard evidence, but I just wonder to what extent the state has got involved.
Even the shipping to fake people?
No, the shipments could well all be legitimate. I'm not aware of any analyst firms, for example, questioning Huawei's publicly announced global numbers. And I certainly, when I was at SA, there were times when, I hope I'm not giving any state secrets here, Neil, where we had a second look at Huawei numbers that they guided us on. We were like, okay, I think we can shave 10% off that for starters. We assumed they tended to exaggerate upwards. But perhaps, and that was 5+ years ago, perhaps in that intervening time when they've become more of a known global player, people accept their public figures as much more, they don't take it with so much of a pinch of salt.
Yeah.
So people accept their global numbers. So one thing I did, a bit of a back of fag pack maths, I looked at Canalis's, so Canalis said they grew about 15 million, let's say, off the top of my head, in China. And then Strategy Analytics reckoned they grew about 11 million globally. So that means they actually declined 4 million outside of China.
Yeah.
So that's why I just think, their numbers, and they were able to say in their quarterlies, look, we're still growing, even though Trump's being a dick to us.
But that might tie in with what Jamie was saying, that there's a lot of patriotism
in
China.
think so. I don't discount that at all.
Whereas in the other regions, you've got this sort of backlash against them. And,
that's all consistent. It's just, like I said, it's just the extent.
If you have a look at the Canalis numbers from about 3 to 4 months ago, they Samsung and Xiaomi have gobbled up market share in Eastern Europe at the expense of Huawei. So
Xiaomi's doing well in India as well.
Yeah, I think Canalis estimate that I can't remember at the top of my head, but you're looking like a 20% like swing in Huawei numbers in their Q2 shipments or something like that. Obviously, I don't know what the most up to date figures are, but yeah, it does look like they're reconcentrating their business back in China.
So I suppose one thing, whether or not the spike is completely legitimate or whether or not there's been a degree of state assistance, whether it's in the form of leaning on the channel, whether it's in the form of getting the public sector to only buy Huawei phones, whatever they might have done to intervene on their behalf, I guess we'll find out in the coming quarters, because you can only stuff the channel for so long. So, I don't see how they could keep growing at 66%.
Well, when's this whole action likely to start?
The Android
results?
Thing. Yeah. They keep kicking the can down the road, don't they, Jamie, in terms of fully implementing the...
Yeah, so it's basically any devices that are on the slate, or when the announcement was made, any devices that were on the slate were allowed to continue with Android being an official partner. But then, when we get into 2020, so any devices that are going to be launched towards the end of this year, I believe, still are all right.
Wasn't the Mate 10 launched with some kind of
that one was
interpretation of Android?
So the Christmas devices now over the next 3 months are going to be more are going to be without Google.
Yeah. So,
but everything up until this point, so all the figures that have been quoted up until this point would have been with Android services on it. But yeah, the latest device is without, and I think Google Maps is the big one. You can't replicate Google Maps and obviously just like the actual Harmony OS.
And the
Let's
apps.
see.
Yeah.
Let's see. Well,
you know
the apps they're not going to have
That's their
the
alternative.
You know
yeah?
the
And it's-
Huawei Mate X Pro, I think the foldable one is going to come out soon. I wonder what's going to be on that.
Yeah.
Is
They've
that the one
launched
they
it in
showed
China.
off in
They've launched it in China
Barcelona?
already.
Already?
The foldy phone. Yeah.
Oh, and is it 2,000 something?
Yeah, it's a ton of money.
2034 adjusted
Like
for
dollars. Yeah.
What's the status of Harmony OS? Is that in the works?
Isn't
or
it called EMUI?
No,
Isn't that- I don't know
that's
anything about
their,
it.
that's already existed.
Oh, okay. That's just the
already
UI.
existed.
The Harmony OS
yeah.
is the Android fork.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So basically, it is. I mean, I can't remember. I'm not most up to date. I haven't actually looked at this, but basically, they can build EMU or whatever it is on top of Android, not Android 10 or whatever it is
Right.
now.
Android 9.
The one before, because they've stopped calling it by sweets names now, haven't they?
I know. That's boring, isn't it?
Yeah.
I was looking forward to a sweet beginning with X.
Yeah. Back one fork, that's the foundation of EMU or whatever it is. And then Harmony OS is currently an IoT operating system, which they believe they can bring across and just expand onto smartphones as necessary. So that's looking likely there's going to be next year, I believe. I might be a bit out of date to do this, but
No, that's fine.
they're ploughing billions into developing the developer ecosystem, because number of apps is going to be a big thing for them.
Yeah.
So are US developers going to be allowed to do anything on this?
That's a good point. Will the Americans let
Don't
their
know.
end of
Well, they've not done that, have they? They've not taken other steps to block US companies from.
I'm just saying, assuming you get one of those Harmony Huawei phones.
I suspect they're
can you
probably just trying to
download
take the moral high
Uber?
ground because there's more whether the US allows its developers to design for it. I think than
I think that's what he's
Chinese.
asking.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
You're
I
talking about
can't
the
see
same
why
thing,
not. No, I mean they're not going to be. They're not. That would be suicidal. Some of these American. You can't. If Trump turns around and says, "No, actually, we're extending the entity list that no US firm can work with a Chinese company," companies like IBM would absolutely shit themselves with these huge multinational billion-dollar corporations who've got joint ventures in, because you can't operate a company in China as a standalone foreign company. You've got to partner with a local company as a joint venture to sell services in there. A load of these companies like HP, Dell,
which is not
Nokia,
American, but
but they got with the acquisition of Alcatel and Bell Labs, they'd be
exactly,
drawn into it somehow. There'd be loads of these companies that would themselves.
No, but what I'm asking is that, so on this Huawei let's call it the Huawei store,
yeah.
first of all, would Huawei allow...
I don't see why Huawei wouldn't allow. I mean, they want to buy. They still want to
Yeah,
get components
they
and
still-
stuff from the US, don't they?
No,
Why
the
would they-
apps, like would they
Yeah.
Why
allow
wouldn't they-
IMDb and
Yeah,
Uber and all these American
I can't
companies?
see
I
why
don't see why
not.
they wouldn't want that.
But
the,
then-
the question always comes with when you're trying to set up your own ecosystem, there's a kind of catch-22, because developers only bother developing apps if the install base is big enough. Otherwise, it just doesn't make economic sense for them. But then the install base tends to only come along if the right apps are there. So you've got this horrible catch-22. I remember writing about this years back when things like BlackBerry and stuff were in decline. It was just like, how do you persuade developers to get involved when you got a declining install base? It's just that you reach this critical mass, which is why we got to this duopoly quite quickly, and Symbian and BlackBerry OS and Palm OS and all that other stuff. Windows all just went out the window.
But then, so would
See what I did
Uber
there?
even bother developing an app just for the Huawei?
Well, that's a question for them.
Yeah,
think they would.
if there's enough users of it for it.
At some point, all of the Huawei, when it nails its OS, it's probably going to turn around and say, "Oh, we're going to migrate all of our devices, irrelevant what the device is. It's going to be a software update, and we're going to take Android off the phone and put whatever the Harmony
stuff,
EMU, whatever it's called, on all the devices." Then all of a sudden, you've got an install base of what? Let's say if they've got 42% of the market now, let's say.
In China,
You're looking at 100% market penetration of smartphones in most developed countries, probably a bit lower in China.
Well, they're overall, they're second in terms of shipments, in terms of global market share, in the 20s.
Yeah.
So that's more than the fifth of the world.
Yeah. So you're looking at a fifth of the world. You're looking at a close, let's say, Android's probably 80% market share over there.
85.
Higher than that because actually
in China you're talking about.
In China.
Oh yeah, more like 90. Apple's not got that.
What's
big
funny
a
is that
market
most
share.
Chinese people that travel abroad have iPhones actually.
So you're looking at an install base of around 900 million devices. I mean that is an install
you're
base
saying
which justifies it.
You're
Yeah,
saying
it
we
certainly
will
does.
move from 2 to 3 operating systems. It's going to happen.
I mean, if
An incredible achievement.
If Trump if Trump carries on with this route, it is utterly unavoidable. Because if he keeps Huawei on the entity list, Huawei cannot work with Android, so it's utterly unavoidable. There has to be a third OS.
Yeah, I stand by my balkanisation prediction. I wrote a story about a month or two ago going, why would anyone outside of China buy a Huawei smartphone? I can't see why a Western consumer, when they got a choice between a Huawei Android phone and a Samsung, or like I've got the Google, the Pixel.
Or Apple especially.
Well, but I'm just restricting it to Android because obviously Apple's kind of law unto itself. I don't see why you'd pick a Huawei Android phone over any other Android phone when it's a diminished Android experience. So I think you just get Huawei, by the sounds of it, stronger than ever in China, but declining everywhere else. And this quarter's results point in that direction.
Yeah. I mean, I foresee if the OS system carries on going down this way, and Trump carries on pushing this very anti-China rhetoric and persists with Huawei being on the entity list, I can imagine you're going to have, Apple as the iOS being very strong in some markets like North America, Switzerland, places like that where they have high store base. Google and Android dominating the West and certain westernized markets in Asia, and then the Huawei device dominating Asia and countries which are particularly allied with China, which will be a huge number of people.
Russia.
Africa.
A lot of South
Africa as well.
Yeah, a lot of
debt
Africa,
to them.
Southeast Asia.
Yeah. It's a huge. That's
Well,
a
they own it.
huge.
Yeah, they are.
Admittedly, they're underdeveloped markets, I mean, but they're huge potential in them.
Yeah, and that's where a lot of the growth is. And then the other interesting position is the other Chinese vendors. So if I'm right, and Huawei's getting a bit of a temporary leg up off the Chinese state, if I was Vivo, Oppo, Xiaomi, etc., I'd be like, hello, what's going on here?
Yeah.
But then they're not going to
We're
say
good
anything
boys.
because you don't give Xi Jinping lip, do you? Or
No.
you find yourself sat
It's
in a
not a good
desert.
idea, apparently.
Yeah, he's not keen on back chat. So so they'll probably go, oh, okay, yeah, great call, Xi. Yeah, you keep backing our competitor. Thanks a lot, mate.
What are they doing like outside China? Those other Chinese companies like
Xiaomi's doing
Oppo?
quite good.
Yeah, Xiaomi's doing very well. I think they're the number
Oppo's
one
names
vendor
are
in
all
India.
over sports events in the
They're
West at the
advertising
moment.
like French Open and
Tennis,
stuff.
yeah, they're all
Well,
over tennis.
they're at the earlier stage. Oppo and Vivo are at an earlier stage. I think Oppo a bit further down
OnePlus.
of their international expansion. Xiaomi's more mature, and they're also more geographically targeted. India is a big focus for them, but I think they've done all right in Eastern Europe as well. OnePlus, we haven't heard about OnePlus for a little while.
Taiwanese.
But they're part of Oppo anyway, aren't they?
The sports thing's a very interesting one because that is just taking a playbook out of Huawei's. That's just taking a page out of the Huawei playbook.
Yeah.
Because if you look back about 5 or 6 years, Huawei sponsored a major football team in every one of the massive European markets. It was like Paris Saint-Germain, wasn't it? I think no, not Paris.
Atletico.
It was Atletico Madrid.
Yeah, I don't
They
remember.
definitely might have been Monaco. It was one of the big French teams,
Yeah.
like Ajax or Eindhoven or something like that. Every one.
Ajax-
Dutch ones.
Ajax
In
sponsored
every-
the stadium.
Yes, yeah.
They were not on the jersey, but yeah.
But in every major market in Europe, they sponsored a massive sport
Have they done
property.
anything here, sports-wise?
They did. They did someone. I
None in
can't
the
remember
Premier League.
who.
No, Jamie, you can't.
I can't say now.
I don't know.
So one other point, actually, before we move this one along, I want to make about the other vendors. So Jamie was talking about this Android fork that Huawei is probably is in the process of doubling down on in China. Well, what if they keep getting this 40% shipment share, and then there's a
Take me out
then
with
there's
a
a big
microphone.
then there's a growing install base of this Android fork. Does there come a point where one of the other guys go, do you know what? the main action in China is with this Harmony OS, not with regular Android. So they'll in a potentially difficult decision to make about whether or not they jump on that bandwagon OS-wise. So yes, that's that. All right, we've done that. Well, yes, and I've got a sort of overlap with the Indian situation. So I'll give you. I think I'm the only one out of the three of us that's been writing about it. So I'll just give you a quick lowdown. But it's turned into a bit of a soap opera. Basically, we know that about 2 or 3 years ago, Jio became a sudden overnight massive player by being given these national licenses and then offering data basically for free to all these very low sort of per capita income Indians, and so they grew their subscriber base to a ridiculous extent, such that in the space of 2 or 3 years they've gone from a standing start to be India's number one operator by subscriber, and that's number one even though Vodafone and Idea, two of the biggest ones, have combined. So now we've basically got a situation in India where you've got Jio quite dominant, you've got Vodafone Idea second, the former number one from a few years ago, Bharti Airtel third, and then you've got these state-run MBNL or something like that.
BSNL and
BSNL, right.
MBNL, yeah, as UK.
Oh, is it?
That's
right,
a UK joint venture.
Okay, yeah.
MTNL, BSNL.
Yeah, one of those bloody acronyms. Yes. And then some state-run ones, and so I've been tracking this just because I find it interesting. I find it especially interesting when the state tries to intervene in commercial matters. Maybe that's why I sort of fixated on this Huawei thing and wondering whether the state was involved there. And so they're bailing out what is it? MSNBC,
MTNL,
there we are,
and BSNL.
Just any acronym begin with M. They're bailing them out, but they've sort of pre-bailed out because they're state-run anyway. But they're basically having to inject a bunch more.
They're state-run, but they're in dire straits. They've struggled for years, and there's a lot of employees at those two companies. I mean, it's hundreds, it's a couple 100,000, maybe it's not quite that many together, but it's a lot. It's over 100,000, and there's already been like a huge unemployment crisis in the Indian telecom sector. Because all these companies have gone out of business. So they don't want more of these kind of people.
And they've got and we're not really sure what the point of them is, other than giving a few people jobs. Because is it right they don't even have data licenses?
They don't have data
so it's
licenses.
Voice.
I don't think. Yeah, it's mainly voice
Voice
services
and
they provide.
Fixed.
Yeah. But I think the bailout includes giving them spectrum and
I think you're right.
And licenses.
So they've announced this thing where they're just going to chuck a bunch of money at them, and I sort of thought, okay, so we're already picking a winner there. That's where I start to get a bit. As we were talking about William Webb last week, I just start to get a bit uneasy when the state tries to pick a winner in a commercial enterprise.
Yeah, I mean, if it does it across the playing field, like if you were to just say these companies get licenses and they have to meet certain coverage obligations and it's fair for...
But I think they're chucking some cash at them as well.
But yeah, just to pick a winner like that.
Okay, right. So they're doing that, and that's one thing. And then they suddenly announced that Vodafone Idea and Bharti Airtel owe them tons of money from certain license fees going back that they'd always contested.
I find it quite hard to get my head around the details of that story. I know Gagandeep wrote about it, and I felt we'd sort of not really gone into what exactly is going on, but it sounds like the Indian government's decided it's basically owed more money for licenses than it got paid, and the Supreme Court's taken its side.
Yes.
And it's a huge amount of money.
It's a huge amount of like billions.
Yeah.
And this has been... And it gets quite technical because they actually get a proportion of your gross revenue, but it's adjusted gross revenue. Yeah. And one of the things they're arguing a toss about is how much it should be adjusted. Presumably, the operators think it should be adjusted a lot, and the government not so much.
What sort of revenues you include in the AGR?
Yeah.
So it's whether it's just telecom revenue or whether it's revenue you get from other things as well.
Exactly. So it all gets a bit technical. The long and short of it is, government wants more cash off these companies than they want to pay, and the Supreme Court's just gone pay up, and now these companies are going, well, in case you had noticed, we're pretty skint at the moment, thanks in no small part to the benign regulatory environment you created for Jio, which is now competing the hell out of us.
Yeah.
And we're losing subscribers and our margins down the toilet and all that sort of thing. So they've started sort of pleading for some degree of clemency. And then there's this trade body, I forget the acronym, which is probably just as well as I'd just mangle it anyway. But they apparently wrote a letter to the government going, look, can you throw our guys a bone? And seeing as you're in bailout mood, can you bail out Vodafone Idea and Bharti Airtel?
Yeah.
The problem is, all the operators are a member of this trade body, including Jio. And then Jio went public with a letter basically having a massive go at this industry body for sending this letter. Obviously, Jio doesn't want them bailed out as far as Jio is concerned. Jio, even in its responding letter, even tried to make out that if they went out of business, competition would still be fine. Right. So basically, if there was a monopoly, a Jio monopoly, that would still be fine. It wouldn't be an issue, which I thought showed a fair bit of nerve on their part.
But it would be, like you say, it's still a massive player, isn't it? Vodafone Idea. So
yes, huge. Obviously, India's an incredibly populous country. It's actually on track to overtake China.
The consolidation's ridiculous, isn't it? I mean, if you look back to the 10, 15 years, they had something like 10 or 12 operators, I think.
Yeah, and a lot of them were regional.
But there were some smaller ones that were national. There's players like Reliance Communications, which just got swallowed up. Massive, wasn't it?
And then just disappeared. No, it's been an absolute bloodbath. But each of the remaining ones have got hundreds of millions of subscribers.
Yeah.
And, a Vodafone Idea even had to send out an announcement saying that they're not going out of business. And their share price went up about 15%, which meant a lot of people thought they were going out of business, which is remarkable, especially when you consider it's Vodafone.
Yeah.
A multinational, fairly competent
they're still
operator
denying
group.
all the talk about them trying to pull out.
Well, that's why their share price went up. So anyway, I know it's all just sort of coming from me, and I don't know how much sort of further discussion there is. I just thought it's a really interesting situation. My feeling is that this has come about because the government went too far in assisting the creation and proliferation of Reliance Jio. To the best of my knowledge, they were awarded the only national 4G license when they came into creation. And basically, a lot of regulatory hurdles were smoothed over.
Yeah.
And then it just so happens, and I'll infer rather than state outright, that they're run by the richest guy in India. And it's funny how often...
Is that the guy who lives in an actual tower?
Probably, yeah. Or
palace.
Yeah.
No, he's got like a...
Made out of frozen champagne or something. And it's just funny how often the companies owned by really rich people happen to get a quite benign.
Well, it wasn't only that. I think some of the other regulations that were introduced were sort of seen to favour Jio quite a lot in terms of really sort of pernickety things like interconnection rates.
That's right.
Which companies pay, each other for terminating traffic.
And they were giving them a benign.
Well, because it's obviously the players that don't have a big market share or in a growth phase want a very different setup from the ones that already serve lots of customers. And all the regulation was kind of engineered to kind of suit Jio, it seemed. So
exactly, that's how it seemed to me.
So there was that. There was the 4G sort of head start. I guess it's very similar to what EE got in the UK, which is also quite a controversial decision when EE got its sort of 4G license.
Allowed to refarm the 1800.
Yeah. So like you say, it does look kind of suspicious.
And now we're at a situation where everyone else except Jio is in a lot of bother. And I just think the Indian state has completely botched the whole thing.
I think Vodafone also feels that it's always had quite a hard sort of time of it in India anyway, because they have this tax case that's been going on for years, and I think that's still sort of occupying their time. And I think they've always sort of felt that. I mean, it's a little bit like China, where you have to have partners to come in. You can't
possibly.
I think they've changed the rules on that a bit. I don't know if you know about that, Jamie, but the rules about foreign ownership in India, in the Indian market,
they're relaxing it.
Yeah. But I think Vodafone always felt, when it came in, it was kind of a difficult environment to come into, and some of the regulations didn't suit them, and
it's very strict.
Favouritism.
You got to have a ridiculously high proportion of your supply chain based in based in India.
Yeah.
If you want a direct to customer retail presence. It's one of the reasons why Apple has always struggled in India, is that they've had to sell through the channel all the time because they don't have manufacturing or source enough materials or employ enough people inside India. So they've never been able to create these Apple experience centres that are, that's a key element of their sales strategy.
So they're just another device on a shelf.
I saw recently they leaked a box that says designed by Apple in California, assembled in India.
Yeah. So this is what they've started doing over the last 3 to 4 months. They've started moving stuff into India so they can get these relaxed rules. Because there are plans to get an Apple store in I can't remember which Indian city, but one of the large Indian cities, so they can actually start building this sort of Apple experience in India.
I thought it was more about, getting away from China and, not getting slammed by tariffs.
But they're also missing out on, like Scott said, it's about to take over as the most populous country in the world. It's like, it's only something like 30 or 40 million behind. I think it's like 1.36 is China, and like India's like 1.33.
And their growth rate's well ahead of China's.
Yeah. So this is you want to take manufacturing out of China because of the tariff war that's going on, but then putting it in India to actually sell more phones in this ridiculously large market.
It's a double whammy.
Oh, it's a good move.
And they quite like a bit of bureaucracy in India. I've only been there once, but I travelled around. This would have been like 20 years ago. And just to get a train, the amount of forms you have to fill in just to get a train.
Yeah, I've been there as well.
Yeah, I mean, what do they do with those forms? But they just love a bit of bureaucracy, don't they? A lot of it's like from the English from 100 years ago.
Yeah, it is. And they have the same sort of court
it.
system, the Supreme Court and different layers.
Right.
And, so everything seems to take ages to get anything done. And obviously the Supreme Court's now involved in what's going on at the moment because they've sort of backed the government on this. People are still trying to take me out with this microphone. Yeah. With this...
For anyone who can't see the video,
payments,
Jamie's
issue.
Celebrating being back in here by whenever Iain talks, he dicks around with his microphone so it moves around. Just so you know, he is the youngest. I suppose we expect him to be childish.
Actually, I think I'm the youngest by a couple of weeks.
That's true.
Yes.
Sorry, you were saying.
I can't even remember now.
Just the bureaucracy
in India.
The bureaucracy in India. Yeah. So the bureaucracy, and maybe I just think.
Where's it all going to end? I wonder.
Well, so I think the government's got itself in a bind now because it could be that it's on the verge of being faced with a monopoly.
A geo-monopoly?
Yeah. Well, if Vodafone Idea is having to send out press releases going, we're not going out of business.
Yeah.
When things can't be going that well, can they?
Yeah. And how bad do things look for Bharti?
They don't appear in the news nearly so much, but they're under the same commercial pressures.
And do they have lots of debt as well, or I don't know what their balance sheet looks like?
I don't think they're probably quite as bad.
They've got their finger in so many different pies around the world, don't they? Because they own part of Singtel, I think, is
right.
One of the Singaporean.
Bharti's a big conglomerate, isn't it?
And it's got a massive presence in Africa as well, isn't it, Bharti? So I don't think they're under the same pressure as like Idea is, for instance.
But they're certainly not coining it like they were before Geo came along.
I don't particularly have much sympathy for them, to be perfectly honest.
Why is that?
I mean...
What, Vodafone?
Any of them, because the reason India was... for years and years, everyone talks about the BRICS nations. And all of these BRICS countries accelerated into the digital economy. Well, not accelerated, but they moved into the digital economy. And India didn't. India was the one that was left behind. And it was mainly because, the telcos weren't spending money. They weren't making data tariffs cheap enough. They weren't rolling out next-gen networks to actually, so they can... do unlimited tariffs. They were happy to charge
and just keep bleeding.
Yeah, just
with
to bleed
service.
Yeah. And then Geo came along, and you look at the progress. They were quoting figures the other day that India was ranked something like 158th in the digital index, and by the end of next year they want to be in the top 50. And you just got to think, that's incredible. That is it. That is the Geo effect.
Yeah. No, I think that's all good point. I think in summary, what's probably happened there, if we remove the possibility of outright corruption and just regulators having their palms lined, and say that they just thought, hold on a sec, we've got a chance to get India really accelerate our digital development by giving a benign regulatory environment to Geo, then that's all fine, that's all understandable, as Jamie says. But I just think they went a bit too far, and now they've got to try and correct back, and that's going to be very difficult and expensive to do.
Do you know? But ultimately, as long as you can control Geo, which is easier said than done, a monopoly isn't a bad thing.
Oh, that's contentious.
If the consumer is getting products for a price, No, but if well, it's not totalitarian because it's a private company, not a public sector organisation. But if the consumer is getting a reasonably priced product, give it, you don't need competition if the consumer is getting a reasonably priced product.
Yes,
so your caveat of if they can be controlled. I mean, the reason we don't allow monopolies is normally they're hard to control.
Yeah.
And furthermore,
they don't give good prices usually, or customer service.
Yeah, and then when they start ripping off their customers, the state steps in and goes, "Well, we're not happy with this," and they just go, "And
what's the price?"
I mean, there's examples of it working. Standard Oil.
Oh, I was about to say that.
Yeah. Standard Oil back in the early 1900s. They were forced to break up for exactly the same for exactly the same reasoning that a monopoly is dangerous because prices could be unfair.
I think they were scared of how much power they had because of how much money they had.
I mean, there's all sorts of. Who's that woman who wrote the expose on them? But when
they actually broke it up, and all these individual companies were supposed to spur prices, it was exactly the same price. So that was, and then you look at, if you say like a monopoly is bad, well, a duopoly isn't too much better either.
No.
But I mean, ultimately, the OS system hasn't really screwed any of us, has it? I mean, you're in a monopoly, and you two are in a monopoly because you're tied to a device and you're in a closed ecosystem. So that's arguably as dangerous.
Nobody's forcing me.
Yeah,
but it's very painful for you to switch.
It's a closed ecosystem. It's
incredibly painful for you to switch.
And I mean, the Pixel makes it really easy. They have a cable thing where you can hook it up and it transfer everything to your phone.
No, the painful bit is the fact that the iTunes and the
your
digital
iTunes?
Stuff.
All the files you got on your Mac that would have to be converted across.
Yeah, Windows, they have these programs that transfers everything.
You'd lose everything in iTunes, for instance.
I don't know, actually. I don't know.
Anyway.
Good thing I don't want to.
Yes. Exactly, because they own you. You just don't know it.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. All right. So that was that. Talking about devices, actually, we got the breaking story today. It was rumoured earlier on in the week, but it was just official as we started recording this. So I'll hand it over to you, Jamie, about Google buying Fitbit. What's going on?
Well, they're buying Fitbit.
That was great. Anyway, anyone else got anything they want to talk about?
Did anyone here ever had one?
No, I've got a few mates that have got them. I think it's a really smart move. What does Google need to do to make sure it carries on making billions and billions and billions every single year? It needs to get its search engine and its services on an increasing number of products. So they brought out they saw the voice interaction trends getting big, so they brought out a smart speaker, and all of a sudden you've got the Google search capabilities on a smart speaker, which wouldn't have happened otherwise. And now they see that wearables is starting to gather a bit of momentum. They buy themselves into the wearables ecosystem, so they can force their Wear OS onto, and therefore a lot of their data services onto the consumer as well. It's just expanding the reach of their core referral and advertising product to a new interface.
I wonder if they'll leave it alone or if they'll,
Well, so this my interpretation of Google's approach to devices. Again, full disclosure, I've got a Google smartphone in my hand, but when they bought Motorola back in the day, they didn't really know what to do with it, and they ended up just having it for about a year or two, and then they sold it on to Lenovo. And the reason they bought it, my impression at the time, was they wanted to inject some momentum into the overall ecosystem. It's the same reason why Microsoft makes those Surface laptops. They don't need to make laptops. For years, in their golden era, they didn't make devices at all. But then it got to a stage where they just felt that people like HP and whoever else was making, Dell was making laptops, wasn't doing a good enough job of moving with the times. So they thought, okay, we're going to show you how it's done. And I think that was Google's thinking behind buying Motorola. And now eventually it turned into these Pixels, which are great devices. But at the time, it seemed to be a botched acquisition. And my gut feel is with this Fitbit, is as Jamie was saying, Wear OS is their brand for the wearable Android. That hasn't really taken off. If you look at numbers, Fitbit does all right, but I think it has its sort of proprietary platform, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Fitbit does all right.
I think the interface is not as complex as the.
No, well, originally it was just a
Watch
fitness
OS.
tracker, wasn't it? But I think they do. I think they've got fitness. I think they've got Fitbit watches now.
But I think that's the reason Fitbit did so well for so many years is that because it didn't try to overcomplicate the matter.
Yeah.
The market wasn't ready for an overcomplicated smartwatch,
No.
and now the market is ready. And now and I think they've lost a bit of ground to the iWatch.
Yeah.
And certain places
Because
like that.
they put quite an emphasis on fitness tracking in the iWatch and all these heart sensors. For people like me who just have to be at the absolute top of their fitness game at all times.
Also, they were much
comes
less
in very
complicated, much more robust.
Yeah, they
much
are.
less
They're
prone to fail.
primarily sort of like a running device, cycling device,
What,
swimming.
the iWatch?
No,
Fitbit.
the
Fitbit,
Fitbit.
right.
Very simplistic.
Yeah.
Are they expensive?
Yeah.
No, much cheaper than.
At the lower end,
iWatch,
they're much
though.
cheaper than a watch.
Oh yeah.
If it's just a fitness tracker. Yeah.
In terms of fitness trackers, they're because you can get because there's a huge,
Like 50
huge
quid or something.
market. Oh,
50
more
is
than
that
that.
all?
No,
I think
more
it
than that.
goes.
What, Fitbit?
No, there's knockoff ones that are like 50
I think
quid.
the entry level is like
Fitbits are
89
yeah.
maybe.
Okay,
They're-
well,
they're
sub 100
north
quid
of
though.
that.
That's still when you consider a Apple Watch costs what 400 quid or something.
But no,
400
it's cheaper than
quid.
that. I think it's more like 300.
Right.
But I think the top of the line flagship Fitbit is still like a good £50 cheaper than the iWatch.
Yeah. It's still multiple hundreds of pounds though.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
there's
No,
loads.
for the full watch with all the
Yeah.
watch.
So basically,
cleverness.
one that you get for 89 is pretty. Doesn't do
Just
much.
a-
Basically,
it's a-
it's a
no point
pedometer.
having
It's
it.
just counting
really?
your steps.
Yeah,
It's just
there's
counting
no
your
point
steps
having
and
it.
your heart rate and that
heart
sort of
rate.
thing.
Yeah, that's it.
Right.
But I think this is a great move. I mean, because like Fitbit is a company which can't really do much at the moment because it's been really, really struggling financially over the last couple of quarters.
Do we know how much they paid for it? Sorry.
No, undisclosed.
Oh.
But it is, it was dominance in the wearable space, but it couldn't convert itself with trends to take it through into the watch space that Apple have been dominating. And now I think because their sales have been declining year on year on year, I genuinely think that they were struggling for cash to actually do some proper innovation and get like a
Meanwhile, Apple's
a
going
top
from strength to
flight.
strength.
Yeah.
I just don't. I mean, if it is just a basic fitness device, I don't really get the point of them that
No,
much.
but they've got.
because-
But now, don't forget, they do have a watch product, but I just don't think it competes with Apple.
Right.
But now you're part of the Google family. You got a couple of billion coming your direction.
Yeah, that could
Look-
change things for
Yeah,
them. Yeah.
because look what Nest did. Nest still exists in the Google family, but they were just left on their own as a hardware business to develop their own products as they see fit. If Google take that approach, then this could be a very,
But
very
what
successful
Google will surely
acquisition.
do, I mean, they may well be hands off in terms of letting it be a semi-autonomous unit.
Yeah.
Keep doing what you do, but presumably they're going to insist that the platform switches
I
from proprietary to Google to Android.
I suspect what they'll turn around and do is they'll go into Fitbit and they'll cut up the business and they'll say, software engineers, you're no longer part of this business. Come work for Google.
Right.
And then they'll take the expertise of the Fitbit guys, plug it into their Wear OS team,
I
and
agree with
grow
that
that
totally.
side of things. And then they'll
That
probably
tends to be how they do it.
separate
It's like the
hardware.
Borg.
Yeah.
Yeah, they sort of assimilate them, but as you
I
say,
know, I
it's
was
still
just
got to be. It's still got to be a going concern. You can't just write off the millions of
No,
revenue
no.
that Fitbit makes.
I
But
still
they'll-
don't get it though. I mean, we've talked about this on a podcast, but I don't get the whole watch thing. Even
No,
though
I
I
don't
watch none
either.
of them.
I don't.
What
I
about?
just-
I mean,
yeah.
you run.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you know how far you've run? Do you just look at Google Maps?
No, I use my
take my
phone,
phone.
and I got one of those arm
But-
strap things.
Right.
I don't like having it in my pocket.
And that's
it really
enough.
irritates
Pure-
me.
pure-
Yeah, it doesn't really bother me there, and it tracks.
maybe
my
some
foot.
people-
no,
Yeah.
Maybe
Pure
some
run,
people
aren't
like
they?
to really obsess over it and go, "Oh, look, I've done a
Pure
mile."
runners use Garmin
He's-
watches.
Yeah,
Instead
I mean, you can't take
revealing
it
his
out easily.
aspirations.
It's a bit of a faff if you want to get your phone out while you're actually running.
Well, exactly.
I
Whereas
tend
if you've
not
got,
to do that
if you've
anyway.
got a watch and it's
You
synced
can,
to your
yeah,
phone,
that's
then
true.
The Garmin one dominates the actual runner space. If it's really about running, it's Garmin.
is it
Yeah.
right? Yeah, I knew that. Yes,
Garmin, okay.
So-
they do the tracker navigation things for
Yeah.
cars.
That was their original thing. But I mean, they've
GPS.
had to get. Obviously, the smartphones absolutely killed
Yeah.
the sat nav industry.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
do you remember when you rented a car in some country and they'd be like, "Do you want to spend £200
Yeah.
for GPS?" Like, no, thanks.
I still love that. I mean, certainly like when I went to Sicily, where I could still roam.
Last year.
A couple of years ago, a year and a half, where I could still roam, excuse the pun, in Italy. and they're like, "Do you want to buy a sat nav?" I'm like, "Why? Just fire my phone
That's
up.
ridiculous.
It's all good." I agree. I think that does seem like a good acquisition by Google. I think the main reason they've done it, I think a good part of the reason, perhaps not the main, is defensive. I mean, Apple, just to quickly recap on their quarterlies, they're not growing the iPhone install base much, but they are doing well in pretty much all other areas, which includes accessories and services.
Yeah. And the iPhone declines down quite a bit from in the last quarter. So there's signs of the 11 being very well received, apparently.
Right, yeah, which still you're a bit baffled by, because you just think
a little bit, yeah.
I think it didn't necessarily like they got the production line exactly right. Like it's sort of unavailable, but like the demand,
the just in time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
okay.
no, that's quite possible. Anyway, they're doing fine, but the point is, as a strategic threat to Google, they're doing better and better at things like accessories, wearables, and services. If it's just iPhones, then that's just business as usual.
Yeah, I'm not. I agree. I agree with you in the sense that Google's trying to muscle into this market, but I think it's more of an offensive move than a defensive move, because I think Wear OS isn't massive, like you said, and it isn't that old either, particularly. So I think they're trying to. I think they're the threat coming in, because, of course, if you got Google coming in as an OS, I'd be seriously worried. There's a reason Android dominates the mobile space, because, I mean, I know you guys will disagree, but I think it's the best OS out there.
No, dude, I think it's amazing. The Pixel phone is a fantastic phone. I mean, I see both worlds. I'm not saying Apple is better at all.
So he's changed his tune now, hasn't he?
No, I'm not saying that at all.
I don't think he's been too sort of tribal about it, to be fair to him.
One more thing about the Fitbit. I wonder if, because when Apple acquired Beats, then soon after they released the AirPods, I wonder if Google will release some sort of their own Fitbit kind of thing.
I think people will be watching this, like a year down the line, they'll be like, okay, what's been the result of this bit of M&A?
I mean, the interesting thing will be, because what you were just talking about there, tying in other areas, what was that story about the motion IP that they've been putting through in patents? So motion detection, like, to change your song, you go like that.
And all gesture and all that. We've been banging on about gesture UI for a while, haven't we?
Because I think Google are big in that.
It's on the Pixel 4, actually. They say it's not quite there.
It's the only thing. I mean, we all agree, all four of us in this room, none of us own a smartwatch. None of us can apparently see the point of them in their current incarnation. Certainly the thought of navigating a screen this size is just a complete waste of time. So then you have to take it away from the touchscreen UI, and it has to be. Whereas if you could train yourself where you could write an email just by waving your hand around.
It's
some kind of Harry Potter scenario.
It would have to be dictated.
Yeah.
Well, it could be voice UI, but or maybe things get really clever down the line, and we learn a hybrid voice gesture UI where you sort of augment one with the other. I don't know, but I mean, there's a possibility there. It's hard for us to imagine now, because it would involve a bit of learning. But, once you get there and it's all just voice and gesture, and you never have to look at a screen, and you just trust it so much that you just talk to your watch, you go, right, send this email to Pierre, let's go down the pub in a bit, send, and I know that's just gone. I don't even need to see it on a screen. I mean, that could change a lot of things.
They are tying it all together. I mean, the one thing that would really complete it is if they went out and bought just sort of like a connected earphone or headphone brand, because that could act as because on your watch, you're going to get sound interference if you're trying to dictate to your watch, unless you want to go like that, and who wants to go like that? So if you had headphones, you could sync it all together with the dictating.
Directly in your brain.
And they already have Google Glass anyway, so they've got the augmented reality side of things going as well. Plus, they dominate mobile, they dominate desktop.
Scary, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, apparently, the Apple augmented reality glasses are coming up as well.
Does the Apple Watch, out of interest, play music?
It has a speaker, but it's terrible.
Right.
But they
You
like,
couldn't
like
Bluetooth.
you can Bluetooth it to your
headphones. But you have to have your phone with you anyway, or something.
Exactly.
No, you don't.
You don't need to, but you would
It's
anyway.
tetherless now.
You don't, but you would anyway.
Well, you might not if you go running.
If you go
decide
running,
you want to
okay,
take
sure.
your phone with you.
Sure.
But
That's
that's
the
the whole
only-
point of a Fitbit anyway, isn't it? For those fitness devices are meant for people doing exercise.
I think you're exactly right, and that's why they remain a little bit niche. So to summarise, you have got Apple Watches with modems in and with flash storage, so they can operate as entirely autonomous mini smartphones.
Yeah.
But obviously, except for when you're going running or you're going to some environment where you need your hands free all the time, why would you ever leave your smartphone at
When
home
we're in no
and rely
pockets.
on this little 1-inch screen?
It depends what you use your phone for. I mean, if you, I can see one of the things I can see is the sort of like a split in the future. I mean, admittedly, as a very small percentage that this will actually happen, but a split when wearables become so good that you can, you can do audio, you can dictate, you can have, the voice assistant access your calendar and all that sort of thing. So you genuinely don't need to have a big device.
Yes.
Yeah.
They split into entertainment devices and communication devices, and communication devices are significantly smaller. You don't need.
Yeah.
You don't actually need that real estate for communicating.
It'd just be for like watching video or something like that.
So I could see that split.
And on the watch, it could
can
be
I.
all just audio messages. Like some people, like my wife certainly does it with her friends. They record
we do it on
minute-long WhatsApp messages.
Yeah.
And I'm like, can you just call? Or
Already.
they record like mini podcasts.
Right.
And they just and then they reply and then do it. I'm like, can you just call each other?
We just do it in like
because
15-second bursts.
Yeah.
We don't do like minute, 2 minute.
she does, like,
I don't
minute
think I've ever
long.
done an audio message on
No, I've
on
never
WhatsApp.
done one.
They are quite
If you're
convenient.
like if you're driving, I bet it's pretty great.
That's just replaced the voicemail, has it?
yeah,
it's
but
just-
it's so much
It's
easier to
instantaneous.
access.
It just
Yeah.
records your audio.
Yeah.
That's it.
But it
Fair
is just literally
Sounds
you
too
don't have
much
to
of a cultural
dial up
leap
a
for me, I
number.
Yeah,
You don't have to
and you can
access
also if you
It's
swipe
one of those
forward.
black phones I used to have on the table.
it
Where's,
locks.
where's that little
Yeah.
dial?
But yeah, but
Sorry,
like
there's an old Git corner going on here.
But like that sort of thing, if you can actually, as soon as they get they work out for the virtual assistant, so they can actually read this properly and dictate it back to you, because that's something that.
Well, if it's an audio message, you just play the audio message, though.
Yeah, but I'm talking about sort of like general messages in
yeah.
WhatsApp as well,
Yeah.
because the one thing that a lot of these assistants still haven't got around is typos.
Yeah.
You see a random typo and it sends it.
It's like, couldn't you
Sends it
read
into
the sentence
mind,
and
yeah,
understand
yeah.
that it makes no sense? Yeah.
What was it? There was some other innovation a few weeks ago where I think it was an illustration of mobile edge computing and why that's quite handy, where you've got a real-time transcription. So, and I thought this would be...
translation service is supposed to be big for edge
But
computing.
transcription,
Yeah,
transcription as well. So you're a journalist, you're at a press event, you recording something, and it transcribes
Yeah.
the recording in real time.
That's
Yeah.
good.
I mean,
Well,
that could
you
make
could
us
do that
even
with-
lazier than
You could
we
do
already
that
are.
with a note app on your phone. I mean,
But not
if
but not real time.
yeah.
It tends to have to go back to the backwards and forwards to the cloud.
Well, this one, if you speak to your phone, it will write everything you say.
Okay,
So I'm assuming if you're on a presentation,
I can't remember. It seemed to be quite clever. Stop raining on my parade.
I think you're talking about translation, probably.
Maybe. Anyway, I think we're done.
We're talking about different things
Yeah.
anyway, it doesn't matter.
You're supposed to be here to facilitate the podcast, not
Sorry.
not throw obstacles in my path. No,
Yeah.
I'm only joking. I think we're done
wreck
now
your
anyway.
insights.
And we haven't got time to talk about UK 5G spectrum, but that's kind of boring.
It
Isn't it?
is, yeah,
So,
forget about that.
so we'll just ditch that. Okay. All right, we'll leave that. I'm going to, before I sign off, I'm going to remember to the message from our sponsor was so good that we thought you might want to hear it again. So here's another little excerpt.
Mobile service providers will need a different approach to successfully roll out 5G new radio capabilities. Check out Amdocs Software automated and analytics-driven solutions at amdocs.com/5G-fast to learn more.
And on that note, thanks a lot for listening, and thanks to Ian and Jamie for joining us, and make sure you join us for the next one.